Greetings, composers. My name is Alan Torok. I'm the composer who was tasked with the pleasant duty of critiquing and commenting on this year's composer entries to the provincial level music competitions. And it has indeed been a pleasure to study these pieces. They were of wide variety and in some cases really daunting ambition. So here's what I propose to do. I'm first going to make a list of the factors that I've considered in analyzing your various pieces. Number two, I'll define these factors and speak of what I consider to be of their importance. And finally, near the end of my analyses, I'll speak of some practices that have been of particular help to me as a composer, especially in the planning of my compositions. And it's my hope that they may help you as well. Okay, here we go then. When I look at a composer's work as an analytical undertaking, I try to do this in an orderly fashion. I try to think in discrete categories that are clearly understood both by me and by the composer in question. And I think you can see from my commentary in your pieces what these categories are. But here is the complete list. Number 1, score quality. Number 2, motivic logic. Number 3, form. Number 4, counterpoint. Number 5, harmonic structure. Number 6, orchestration. Number 7, instrumental suitability. Number 8, expressive focus. You can see that originality for me is not on the list. It's actually not an absolute and necessary value in composition for me. Originality is actually not that easily defined, for one thing. Number 2, secondly, a composition may cultivate unusual ideas, but fail in its execution. Number 3, an original idea just may not be that strong. It may be original, but weak. So I consider originality one value among a whole variety of values. There's another concept that I prefer over originality, which encases some of the characteristics of originality. So, a piece may be cast in a traditional ABA form, for instance, a ternary form, but it may have very unusual phrases, very unusual crooked phrases. It may have all kinds of aspects that ABA forms maybe don't always have or don't usually have. This gives a fresh perspective on an established formal formula. And such things happen much more frequently than utter originality. And to me, they may be more desirable than stark originality, which sometimes cannot bring an audience along. On notation. To a layperson or to many improvising musicians, notation sometimes seems like an impediment to music, and perhaps to an improvising musician it is. But to a composer, one who wants to communicate their music precisely, through human performers, its importance is overwhelming. You have to know how to do it extremely well. By writing precisely and correctly, the composer taps into literally hundreds of years of musical training that have been passed from musician to musician. Precise notation taps into that professional musical environment in a way that a demonstration recording alone does not. And this is also why I consider performance training, that is to say, the mastery of an instrument, including voice, is essential for a composer. The long process of instrumental mastery teaches one the details of musical notation along with the traditions of that instrument. And on all matters of notation, one of my go-to sources of definitive information on professional notational practices is this book by Gardner Reed. Okay, I think I guess you can see it. I'll actually put a note on the video. Its title is simply Music Notation, and it tells you everything about how to notate things. It's an extremely detailed source of information. There are, of course, more recent reference books on the changing practices of music notation, but Reed's book is still one that I go to because it's very good for traditional practices. I should also say that it's a reference book. There are many books on music notation that teach you a lot of details about music notation, but they're not definitive. They do not go into ultimate details. Nevertheless, he's my go-to man, Gardner Reed, an American composer. Number 2, motivic logic. Motives are the building blocks of music. They're the small bits of music out of which melodies and accompaniments are spun. So the question I ask in a given composition, one of them is, how consistent is their character? Is your piece about one set of motives or a couple of set of motives? How many types are there? Too many motives is a problem more often than too few motives. Now, why is this? It's because music exists in our memory. It is a moment-to-moment experience, but it is our memory that makes sense of it. And to be memorable, music has to be simple enough to hold in memory, in short-term memory. And this is why motives tend to be simple. They should be simple. Then I also ask, well, how are these motives fit together? Is there space between them, or are they connected in a long string? And finally, I ask, well, how do they add up to create a clear musical shape? Some kind of a form, whether it's a phrase form or whether it's a sectional form. So these are questions I ask, okay? And of course the answer will depend on what the piece is doing. Number 3, form. Why am I concerned with form? The overall shape of a piece. Why am I concerned with that at all? Well, it's because it's form that will keep the piece in our memory. Our brains, that is to say our memory, hates formlessness. That is why we see recognizable faces in cloud formations. Our brains are pattern-seeking organs that will create forms even where there are none. So clear forms in music are an absolute necessity, and they take many shapes. It could be in the form of, for instance, an exposition section, a development section, and a recapitulation section, which are, you can define them as ABA, or a binary section, a binary piece that's divided into two equal sections, A and B, or A, and then a variation of A. Still two parts. And you can have developmental forms where you have like a set of variations where you have a theme, a set of phrases, which are then repeated many times, but always in a new format. The note values may change, the harmonies may change a little bit, the rhythms may change, the tempo may change, but the original melody, the original structure, the harmonies and motives are still there in some way. I want to make clear here that even if the actual sounds of your piece are amorphous and very loose, the composer that assembles them must still be very clear about where his forms begin and where they end, if only for the sake of the composer, that of himself, so that they can manipulate their music with clarity. Number 4, counterpoint. Multiple melodic lines are the norm in Western music and are usually discussed under the rubric of counterpoint. The most common type consisting of a melody line and a contrasting accompaniment. songs, in other words, typical modern songs. But there are many other forms of counterpoint, including imitative counterpoint, where multiple voices are speaking about the same subject. Then there's antiphonal counterpoint. This is when a group of musicians, a portion of an orchestra, is situated in one part of a room, and the other group is situated in another part, and they speak to each other back and forth. There have been some composers that have made that a feature of their music. I'm thinking, for instance, here of the American Henry Brant. This actually can be a major aspect of a piece's musical structure, especially in orchestral music and in opera, where instruments and characters are located in different parts of a stage, and dramas are enacted, each in their own space. A soloist here, a portion of the orchestra there. There have been many pieces now written for orchestra in which an orchestra of 60 or 70 or 80 musicians are located in different parts of a large hall, which creates a musical experience that is quite different from a traditional experience where musicians are all together in a relatively small portion on the stage. Number 5, harmonic structure. All of the above features of a composition are interlocked with the harmonic language of a composer. I think of a composer's harmonic language as the equivalent of the language that a person speaks, and a composer must find one or develop one through which their motives, forms, and counterpoints will be understood. Now, this used to be, when I say used to be, I'm talking now about 1600 to about late 1800s. This used to be a common language. Harmony was a common language. But I would say for the last 100 years, since just before the First World War, composers have tended to develop their own language. And as the 20th century progressed, languages became more and more unique to particular composers. And that's where we stand today. Composers tend to develop their own harmonic language out of a huge array of possibilities that at one time would never have been considered. For this reason, though, that is to say, for the importance of harmony for developing your music, you must study harmony. It's a major feature of compositional study. Now, the harmonies in any given piece can be absolutely rudimentary. This is not really, it's not a qualitative question. It can be rudimentary and can be incredibly powerful. As it is in a lot of songwriting, it is always very important. So you must study it. Number 6, orchestration. Orchestration is often defined as the art of combining the sounds of different instruments within a composition, especially large group compositions. And indeed, this is a good definition. But some instruments, through their inherent color possibilities, can also be thought of to have orchestral color. And prime among these are the piano with its huge range, and the guitar with its many methods of playing, and also with the wide range of colors available on its different strings. And orchestration can and should be used to structure a piece with particular instrumental colors used in particular sections of a piece. Now, I should mention here that I saw that at work, actually, in a very sophisticated fashion in a number of the ensemble compositions that I looked at. Number 7, instrumental suitability. Of my categories of consideration so far, this is the only one that does not figure as a contribution to form, although it did figure into my final considerations of expressivity in some pieces. It goes without saying that music for a human player must suit its instrument. And it should be more than merely possible to play. It should fit the instrument extremely well and use the strongest characteristics typical characteristics of that instrument. Otherwise, why would you use the instrument to begin with? And for a composer, that entails a major field of study and preparation. If they intend to write for many types of instruments and ensembles, they should study these instruments in great detail. In my own case, it has been pretty well a lifelong study. Although my professional performance instrument was for 30 years the guitar, I have taken lessons on violin and on cello for many years. Cello for about 7 years, and violin maybe 5. And for several years at different times, I also studied the flute, clarinet, and trumpet. And in addition, I spent 18 years conducting youth orchestras and bands. So that gives me a certain insight into musical practice on various instruments that you really can't get just from studying an orchestration manual. And such studies are never undertaken before composing music. You may do a little bit of that, but ideally they're simply part of a composer's musical life, their musical growth. And I gotta say, such study is a pleasure at every step. And now I get to my final consideration in analyzing these pieces: expressive focus. This is the final category of consideration that I fully undertake only after examining all the other aspects of the music in question. So by the time I've looked at the music from all these points of view that I mentioned, I should know something specific and important about the piece. Now I can try to understand the composer's expressive purpose. If their music follows a historical pattern of forms, for instance, or binary, ternary, rondo, variations, free fantasy, narrative, at this point, I should be able to understand the composer's expressive direction and how it's affected by their motives, forms, and their harmonies. I now have the evidence. Okay, the way of thinking that I have just described, I've been applying it to analysis, to taking it, to assessing others' music after it has been written. But I apply that thinking to my own composing while I'm doing it, of course. Not necessarily in that order, because creative activities, they usually have their own unique paths. There's no way to predict the order of operations when you're hit by an idea that just won't let you go. But all of the matters that I just mentioned have to be considered somewhere along the path of writing your music. And even rejection is consideration. If you reject the use of contrapoint, for instance, or reject the use of any considerations of orchestration, this is also a consideration. As I said at the start of this video, composers, I want to offer you a few tricks of the trade before closing my commentary. So, here goes. After going on and on about the importance of careful score preparation and the notation of your music, I want to discuss a very important limitation to any score, especially of a large piece. Its major compositional drawback, and it is this. A score, unless it's a very small one, cannot show you the entire piece in one clear view. And this gains in importance the larger your piece is. A score is optimized for performance and not for composition. It tells musicians exactly what to do and in great detail. So, the trees of the forest are in a detailed view, but the forest is not. It's very hard to see the forest for the trees in large pieces, especially orchestral pieces and large chamber music pieces. However, when a composer writes a large piece, they need to keep in sight the entire piece, not just the several pages that they are working on at that moment. For this reason, composers find various ways to achieve this. Prokofiev was known to lay out his large scores on the floor so he could view and measure the entire thing from time to time during writing. And the late Michael Colgrass often made 6-foot-long rolls of paper with simple graphic representations of his music on it. Much of his planning was done not in music notation at all, it was done in suggestive symbols that could all be seen without turning the page. My own method for keeping an entire score in view is to make a miniature blueprint that is no longer than 2 or 3 letter-sized pages, taped end to end. It is a very short ribbon that shows basic but accurate outlines of the piece, which shows the following. It shows measure numbers, time in minutes, tempi, motivic sections, climax areas, dynamics, and tonalities. All of this can be seen at a glance. I'm now going to show you 2 such graphic representations. The first one is a finished one that I use for demonstration purposes, and the second one is a much rougher one. It's a working blueprint that is revised as the piece is being written. The second and last tip I want to leave you with is about my initial steps in a composition. I've found it very useful to finish short motivic section, a single short motivic section of music of perhaps 20 or 30 measures in all its performance details, and only then going on to other parts. This allows me to get to know my basic musical ideas in the greatest detail. I have found that this practice focuses my imagination on very specific aspects of my music, and it makes further development all the clearer. So, composers, if you have followed me this far, I thank you, and I hope my discussion and analysis of your music helps you along in your newest compositions, and I wish all of you good luck. Bye for now.